West. I was the first open education project director at Tacoma Community College. My role was to work with early faculty adopters on finding and using open education in their classes. I also recruited student advocates. I set some of the metrics for how the project was successful. Basically, my role here was to start the project on a good foot.
Hi, I'm Christie Fierro. When the OER project started at Tacoma Community College, I was a teacher in the communication department. I was fortunate to be introduced to Quill West right at the beginning and was able to accept the challenge to start implementing OER in my classes. In March of 2015, I transitioned into being the project coordinator so we could keep the project alive and keep growing and moving forward.
My name is Christopher Soran, and I spent over 13 years working here in e-learning at TCC. I was supported OER in a variety of roles. Most of the time I was in the interim director and director capacity supporting OER and helping support faculty integrate that into their coursework. So taking OER when it first started out was just a small little project that only had a couple years worth of funding. And thanks to the great support from the TCC leadership and all of our collaborators across campus with the faculty and the library, we're able to take the standard course development process and integrate the development in OER into that. And so it took it from just this regular short project, or the short project that had limited time and limited funding, into a regular way of doing business, of getting faculty those stipends, and building out those courses, those quality courses for students with these openly licensed materials.
My name is Candice Watkins. I'm the Interim Dean for Library and Learning Innovation. So when I came to TCC about 7 years ago as library director, from the very get-go, I was interested in building OER. And luckily, my vision for building this broad foundational support was the same as the director of e-learning, Christopher Soran, at the time. And so we worked really closely together to build broad foundational support for OER. And over the years, we saw OER grow consistently, steadily every year. And so it was a great partnership, and it's exciting to see how everything has grown over the years.
I'm Jennifer Snoek-Brown, the OER faculty librarian at TCC, and I joined the TCC library in fall 2016. And at this point in the year 2022, it is amazing and humbling to realize that I've been part of TCC's OER journey for over half this past decade. My role as OER librarian was a newly created faculty librarian position in 2016. And for that vision, I thank Candice Watkins, who was at that point the library director. One of the main reasons I wanted to join TCC was because of the strong OER foundation already in place. I wanted to be part of TCC's open culture and help build upon that strong foundation.
My name's Mary Fox. I teach writing here at TCC. I'm currently co-chair of the Written and Oral Communication Department. And I jumped on OER pretty early, and my original motivation was to save students money. I really jumped on with Christie Fierro right away because I saw the huge benefits and the barriers that expensive textbooks presented to my students.
I think just the consistent growth is pretty amazing. I mean, you look at the amount of money that we're saving students. In 2012, 2013, it was between $200,000 and $300,000 a year, which was amazing to start out with. Now we're saving students about $1.5 million a year, which is staggering. We have over 300 sections of OER, and we have 70% of TCC students are enrolled in at least one OER class. That to me is astounding and inspiring, and I'm just blown away by it.
As an instructor, when I first converted to OER, there was a small amount of communication material available. Over the years, it has grown exponentially. There is really OER content for almost every field available now.
That faculty adoption was the key to this whole thing. An area that probably still has more growth to do in the future and that I saw started to grow was through the supplemental materials, the quiz questions, the PowerPoints, all those extra things that the textbook publishers provide as part of the whole package of things available.
So 10 years ago when we started the Tacoma Open Education Project, our work was really about a proof of concept. Our goal was to show that faculty with support could find and use open materials in their teaching and improve student learning. We have moved our conversation about what an educational resource is to focus more on social justice and student voice and highlighting the stories in educational resources that don't get told in mainstream textbook adoption and publication.
Because there has been a huge shift, both for me as an instructor and on campus, I think with OER. I jumped into OER because of the financial reasons. I knew that textbooks were a huge barrier for students, and the financial aspect is one important aspect, but it is not the only aspect. I think over the last 10 years, as our college has really, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, thought about who we are as a college and how we can be more culturally sustaining, culturally relevant, anti-racist college. OER helps us to do that. OER really does allow me as an instructor to honor what students bring to the classroom, the expertise, the knowledge, the understandings, and then we kind of build the class together.
So one of my favorite recent stories about whether or not how students are impacted by OER is I do a continual evaluation with students and ask them, how does your studying change in a class that uses OER that doesn't use instead of textbooks? How is it different than your classes that use textbooks? And I asked a student that recently, and he looked at me and went, I've never had a class use a textbook. And I wanted to stand up and cheer. It was amazing that this student had been at our college for a year and never purchased a textbook because of our Open Education Resource Project.
I see the impact everywhere, but where for me as an instructor it has been most powerful, and I think for my students also, is in my Introduction to Literature classes. We had huge anthologies, hundreds of pages, mostly white-centered anthologies with some diversity that we would use to teach Intro to Literature. As we are growing in our culturally sustaining, culturally relevant, anti-racist work on campus, we realize the harm that those big anthologies have done, and especially who they've left out. And when we brainstormed different communities of voices that we might focus on in an Intro to Lit class, instead of the traditional kind of ethnic groupings of literature. And instead, Jennifer showed me how we could seek out literature from communities that haven't had a voice, the community of incarcerated, people experiencing incarceration, communities of LGBTQ plus folks, Muslim Americans, communities of differently abled folks. Jennifer, through her expertise and her passion, was able to put together OER resources for dozens of different communities based on kind of as we started brainstorming. So in my Intro to Lit classes, students have the ability or have the opportunity to choose communities that they either identify with or they're interested in learning more about, and to explore the literature of those various communities. It's crazy, it's wonderful.
Once we got past the impact of student savings, the next thing I noticed was that the students were so invested in what we were doing, they continued to think about what we were studying. Students that I've had 2 and 3 years ago are still sending me content that they've come across saying, hey, think about using this next time you teach the course. That's powerful. This wasn't just a mark on their transcript, something to get them to graduation. They're still learning and growing with this content. Of course, saving money is important, but I've seen a lot of additional benefits for students and for us that the retention increased. In Washington, schools used to be funded by enrollment. however many students we had in the class would impact the amount of funding the school would have. That changed several years ago, and there were achievement benchmarks when a student earns 15 credits, 30 credits, receiving a certificate, graduating. These are benchmarks they call student achievement points or SAI points. We started tracking the students in open courses and realized the students in open classes were reaching those benchmarks at a faster and higher rate than students that weren't in OER courses. So it started to show that it was also impacting student success.
The things that I heard about the OER were through faculty and the stories the students told them. Stories like, I can buy groceries because I didn't have to buy this expensive textbook. It's little moments like that that just make it all worth it. Seeing that we're really living out the mission and providing that equity to our students through a variety of ways, through these instructional materials. You know, we don't have to sit around and wait for a textbook publisher to put captions on the videos. We're gonna just do it and then openly license them and share that out with the world, and everybody benefits.
I'm kind of blown away by that right now. That's amazing. TCC has saved students so much money. I also think it's really huge because I know that it impacted students' lives. And that's just amazing. I'm so blown away by that. I didn't know it was that high.
That sure is a big number. It's just amazing to see that kind of growth. It's so cool to know that it is making a difference in the lives of our students makes it all worth it. And that's just so cool to hear.
I knew textbooks were expensive, and that I would always choose like the cheapest textbook, you know. I just wasn't in the mindset to understand that that could be possible. I didn't know that that was possible. I mean, it is our responsibility to think differently about higher education. That's a huge barrier that we've been able to kind of knock down for students. I think our responsibility as a college is to try to identify the barriers where students face. I think money is kind of an easy one, but I think it's a really good start for us. It's incredible, but I think it's only the beginning of trying to identify a lot of barriers, other barriers that students face in higher education.
When the project first started, my role was faculty. I was a teacher. So while the administrators were in the meetings for administrators, I was in the meeting for teachers, and know really firsthand how dedicated and passionate about student success our faculty at TCC are. So I knew that we just needed to empower them with how to do it and the resources to do it, and I'm not surprised that they have taken it to this level already and can't wait to see where it goes next.
I love that TCC is still invested in this work.